The ice beneath Beatrice Richardson's boots cracked like gunfire, and she knew with terrible certainty that she was going to die in this frozen Wyoming river just as her husband had died 6 months before. The December wind howled across the Powder River, carrying snow that stung her eyes as the water beneath her gave another sickening lurch. She had been foolish to try crossing where the ice looked thick. Desperate to reach town before nightfall with the few possessions she could carry after losing the homestead to debt. Now those possessions floated away as the ice broke completely, plunging her into water so cold it felt like knives stabbing every inch of her body. She tried to scream, but the shock stole her breath. Her heavy winter coat became a sodden weight dragging her down. Her fingers scrabbled at the ice edge, but it kept breaking away in her hands. The current pulled at her legs, trying to sweep her under the solid ice where she would be lost forever. Through the spray and her own frozen tears, she saw the far bank and thought how cruel it was to die within sight of safety. Then she heard hoofbeats thundering across the frozen ground, coming fast and hard. Ethan Quincy had been tracking a lost calf when he saw the woman on the river. He had shouted a warning, but she either did not hear or did not understand the danger. When the ice gave way, he was already spurring his horse forward, yanking the rope from his saddle. He did not think about the risk or the cold or anything except that someone was drowning and he had seconds to act. He hit the ground running, boots sliding on the icy bank. The woman's head kept disappearing under the water, her movements growing weaker. Ethan tied the rope around his waist with practiced speed and looped the other end around his saddle horn twice, then waded into the shallows where the ice had not yet formed. The cold punched through his clothes, but he pushed forward, breaking through the thin ice at the river's edge. "Hold on," he shouted. "I'm coming." Beatrice heard the voice through the roaring in her ears. She managed to turn her head and saw a man moving toward her, a tall figure in a brown duster and wide-brimmed hat. She tried to reach for him, but her arms would not work properly anymore. The cold had stolen all her strength. She felt herself sinking again, the dark water closing over her face. Strong hands grabbed her coat. She felt herself being pulled, lifted. Her face broke the surface and she gasped, choking on river water. The man had her under the arms now, dragging her backwards through the broken ice. She heard him grunting with effort, heard the splash of water and crack of ice. Then they were in the shallows and he was lifting her, carrying her up the bank. "Got you," he said, his voice rough with exertion. "I got you." He laid her on the frozen ground and she curled into herself, shaking so violently her teeth cracked together. She could not feel her hands or feet. Everything was white and gray and so cold, she thought the cold had replaced her blood. Through chattering teeth, she tried to speak, but nothing came out. Ethan looked at her blue lips and knew he had to act fast. Hypothermia killed quickly out here. His ranch was 20 minutes away at a hard gallop. She did not have 20 minutes. He stripped off his duster and wrapped it around her, then scooped her into his arms. She was small, barely over 5 feet, and thin in a way that spoke of hard times. Her hair was dark brown and plastered to her pale face. "My horse," he said, though he was not sure she could hear him. "We need to get you warm." He managed to get into the saddle with her cradled in his arms, wrapped in his coat. She was still shaking violently against his chest. He turned his horse toward home and urged it into a gallop, one arm locked around the woman while his other hand held the reins. The December afternoon was already fading into evening. The temperature would drop even further once the sun set. The ride seemed to take forever. Ethan kept talking to her, trying to keep her conscious. "Stay with me now. We're almost there. You're going to be fine." He did not know if any of it was true, but he kept talking anyway. Her shaking had decreased. which worried him more than if she had kept shivering. The body stopped shivering when it ran out of energy to fight the cold. His ranch appeared through the blowing snow, a sturdy two-story house his father had built 20 years ago with a barn and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant his foreman Marcus had kept the fires going. Ethan rode straight to the house and dismounted carefully, keeping the woman secure in his arms. "Marcus," he shouted. "Marcus, I need help." The door flew open and Marcus Turner appeared, a grizzled man of 50 with gray in his beard. His eyes widened when he saw the woman in Ethan's arms. "Good Lord, what happened?" Fell through the ice on the Powder River. "Get hot water started and bring every blanket we have to my room. Now." Marcus moved fast for his age, disappearing into the house. Ethan carried the woman upstairs to his bedroom, the largest room with the biggest fireplace. He laid her on his bed and started stripping off her wet clothes. Modesty had no place when someone was dying of cold. He had seen men freeze to death in the war and knew what needed to be done. Her clothes came off in sodden layers. A worn wool dress, 2 threadbare petticoats, a chemise with careful mending. Everything spoke of poverty and hard use. When he had her down to her undergarments, he wrapped her in the quilt from his bed and started rubbing her arms and legs through the fabric, trying to get her blood flowing again. Marcus appeared with an armful of blankets and a shocked expression when he saw the woman in Ethan's bed. "Boss, is she alive?" "But barely. Get those hot water bottles filled and bring them up, and some warm broth if we have any." Ethan piled the blankets on top of the woman, then stirred up the fire until it roared in the fireplace. The room grew warm quickly. He sat on the edge of the bed and took one of her hands in his, rubbing it gently. Her fingers were like ice, the skin pale white. He watched her face for any sign of consciousness. She was pretty in a delicate way, with fine features and dark lashes against her pale cheeks. Young, too, probably not more than 25. He noticed the thin gold band on her left hand and wondered where her husband was, why she had been alone on that river. Marcus returned with hot water bottles wrapped in towels. They placed them around her body, careful not to burn her skin. Then there was nothing to do but wait. Ethan stayed beside her, monitoring her breathing and the slow return of color to her face. An hour passed. Then, too, the woman's breathing deepened and her skin lost some of its deathly pallor. The violent shivering started again, which Ethan took as a good sign. Her body was warming enough to fight back. He kept the fire high and the blankets piled on. Finally, as full dark settled outside, her eyes fluttered open. They were blue, he noticed, a deep blue like the sky before a storm. She looked around in confusion, then focused on him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Easy now," Ethan said softly. "You're safe. You fell through the ice, but you're safe now." She stared at him for a long moment, then tears began sliding down her cheeks. Not loud crying, just silent tears that cut at something in Ethan's chest. He squeezed her hand. "You're all right. You're going to be fine." She shook her head slightly, the movement weak. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken. "My things. Lost everything. Things can be replaced. You're alive. That's what matters." More tears fell. She closed her eyes. "Nothing matters. I have nothing left. I am nothing left." Ethan felt Marcus's presence in the doorway but did not turn around. He kept his attention on the woman, on her tear-stained face and the desolation in her voice. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She opened her eyes again. "Beatrice Richardson. I'm Ethan Quincy. This is my ranch. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. I cannot pay you. I'm not asking you to." She looked at him with those storm blue eyes, and he saw something in them that went beyond physical cold, beyond the near death in the river. He saw a deep, soul-level exhaustion, a kind of spiritual hypothermia that had nothing to do with ice water. "Why did you save me?" she whispered. The question surprised him. "Because you needed saving." "I did not want to be saved." The words came out flat, empty of emotion. "I wanted the river to take me. I wanted it to end." The confession hung in the air between them. Ethan heard Marcus quietly retreat down the hall. He looked at this small, broken woman in his bed and felt something shift in his chest, some door he had kept locked swinging open. "I'm glad it didn't end," he said. "I'm glad I got to you in time." Beatrice turned her face away, fresh tears streaming. "You should have let me go. I'm broken. Too broken to fix. My husband is dead. The homestead is gone. I have nothing and no one. What's the point of going on?" Ethan reached out and gently turned her face back toward him. His hand was warm against her cold cheek. When she met his eyes, he spoke with quiet conviction. "I'll heal you." She stared at him, shocked by the simple certainty in his voice. "You do not even know me. I know you fought to survive in that river. I know you're still here, still breathing. That's enough for now." He stood and added another log to the fire. "Get some rest, Beatrice Richardson. Tomorrow will be better." He left her then, closing the door softly behind him. Beatrice lay in the warm bed, surrounded by blankets, and felt the tears come harder. She did not understand this stranger who had pulled her from the river, who spoke with such confidence about healing and tomorrow. She did not believe healing was possible for her. But exhaustion pulled at her, the deep bone tiredness that came after the body's fight with death. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Ethan found Marcus in the kitchen, heating up stew. The older man looked at him with questions in his eyes. "She tried to kill herself?" Marcus asked quietly. "No, yes, maybe." Ethan sat heavily in a chair. "She's lost. Her husband died. She's got nothing left." "And you told her you would heal her." Marcus shook his head. "Boss, you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save everyone, just her." Marcus ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of Ethan. "You have a good heart, Ethan, but that woman is hurting in ways that go beyond what you can fix with a warm bed and hot food." "Maybe, but I have to try." Ethan ate his stew without tasting it, his mind on the woman upstairs. He thought about her tears, her confession, the deadness in her voice when she said she was broken. He had seen that look before in the war in men who had given up inside even though their bodies still functioned. Some of those men had recovered, some had not. He wondered which kind Beatrice Richardson would be. That night he slept in the spare room down the hall, but he woke several times to check on her. Each time she was sleeping, her breathing steady. In the firelight she looked peaceful, younger. He found himself wondering about her life, her husband, what had brought her to that frozen river. Morning came cold and bright. Ethan was up before dawn as usual, tending to the horses and checking on the cattle. When he returned to the house, he found Beatrice awake and sitting up in bed, the blankets pulled around her shoulders. She looked better, color in her cheeks, but her eyes still held that haunted quality. "How are you feeling?" he asked from the doorway. "Warm." She looked around the room at the solid furniture and thick curtains. "This is a nice room. Your wife must keep it well." "No wife, never married. This was my parents' room. They both passed 5 years back." "I'm sorry," she paused. "And I'm sorry for taking your bed." "I can move to, you'll stay right there until you're fully recovered. I've got plenty of other places to sleep." He came into the room with a cup of hot coffee. "Marcus made breakfast. Think you can eat something?" She took the coffee with both hands, savoring the warmth. "I should go." "I have imposed enough." "Go where?" The question stopped her. She looked down at the coffee. "I do not know." "Then you'll stay here until you figure it out." He sat in the chair by the window. "Tell me what happened, Beatrice. How did you end up on that river?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tight around the coffee cup. When she spoke, Her voice was low. "My husband James and I came to Wyoming 3 years ago. We had a homestead near Buffalo, 160 acres. We were going to build something together, make a life." She paused, swallowing hard. "James died in June. A horse threw him, broke his neck. He was gone before I could even ride for help. I'm sorry. I tried to keep the homestead going, but I could not do it alone. The crops failed. I could not handle the animals by myself. The bank foreclosed in November. They gave me a week to leave." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I packed what I could carry and started walking to Buffalo. I thought maybe I could find work there, maybe as a seamstress or a cook. But when I reached the river, I just stopped. I looked at that ice and thought how easy it would be to let it all go. But you didn't. I started across. I thought I would make it. Then the ice broke and I was in the water, and I realized I did not want to die after all. How foolish is that? I wanted to live, even though I have nothing to live for." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You have yourself to live for. That's more than nothing." She shook her head. "You do not understand. James was everything. We met when I was 18, married when I was 19. He was 23, so full of dreams and plans. We were supposed to grow old together. We were supposed to have children and grandchildren. When he died, all of that died with him. I'm only 24 years old and my life is already over. Your life isn't over. It's just different than you planned." "Different," she laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Different like broken, different like empty. I wake up every morning and the first thing I remember is that he's gone. That hollowness just fills me up until there's nothing left but emptiness." "How do you heal from that?" Ethan did not answer right away. He looked at this young widow with her blue eyes and her broken heart and felt that pull again, that urge to help her, to fix what was shattered inside her. He did not fully understand it himself. "One day at a time," he said finally. "You heal one day at a time, and you don't do it alone." She met his eyes. "Why do you care? You do not know me. I'm nothing to you. You're someone who needed help. That's enough." He stood. "Now, are you going to come down and eat breakfast, or do I need to bring it up here?" Beatrice looked down at herself, wrapped in blankets, wearing only her undergarments. "I do not have any clothes. Everything was lost in the river. I'll see what I can find. My mother was about your size." He returned 10 minutes later with a simple gray dress, stockings, and a warm shawl. They had been packed away in a trunk, preserved with cedar. Beatrice touched the fabric gently. "Are you certain? My mother would have wanted someone to use them. Get dressed and come downstairs when you're ready." Ethan left her and went down to the kitchen where Marcus was frying eggs and bacon. The older man gave him a knowing look. "She's staying then, for now. And what happens when she's healed up? You just going to let her walk away?" "I haven't thought that far ahead." "Maybe you should start thinking about it. That's a hurting woman up there and you're a decent man with a good heart. Situations like this can get complicated. She needs help, Marcus. I'm going to help her. That's all there is to it." Marcus flipped the eggs. "If you say so, boss." Beatrice appeared 20 minutes later, dressed in the gray dress that fit reasonably well. She had braided her dark hair and pinned it up. She looked nervous standing in the kitchen doorway, her hands clasped in front of her. "Come sit," Ethan said, pulling out a chair. "You must be starving." She sat carefully and accepted the plate Marcus offered. For a few minutes she just ate, clearly famished. Ethan watched her from across the table, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. She was not just recovering from the river. She was recovering from months of hardship and grief. "This is very good," she said quietly to Marcus. "Thank you." "You're welcome, madam." Marcus refilled her coffee. "Boss says you're from a homestead near Buffalo." "Was from a homestead. It's gone now. Hard country up there. Hard to work a place alone." "Yes." She set down her fork. I should have sold it after James died, should have been practical, but I kept thinking if I could just hold on, if I could just make it work, then his death would not have been for nothing. Instead, I lost everything anyway." "You didn't lose everything," Ethan said. "You're alive. You can start over, start over." She looked at him with those sad blue eyes. "I do not know how to start over. I do not know how to be someone other than James Richardson's wife." "Then maybe it's time to learn how to be just Beatrice." The words sat between them, heavy with meaning. Beatrice looked away, blinking back tears. She was so tired of crying, tired of this grief that never left her, tired of feeling like a ghost in her own life. "I will stay until I am recovered," she said finally. "Then I will find work in town and repay you for your kindness. There's no debt to repay." "There is to me. You saved my life. That matters even if I did not want it saved." Ethan nodded, accepting this. "Then we'll figure out the rest as we go." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Beatrice rested and recovered her strength. Ethan worked the ranch with Marcus and the two other hands who worked for him. In the evenings, Ethan found himself drawn to the main house where Beatrice had started helping with cooking and cleaning, insisting she needed to earn her keep. They talked during those evening hours, tentative conversations that gradually deepened. Ethan learned that Beatrice had grown up in Missouri, the youngest daughter of a schoolteacher. She could read and write, unusual for women in these parts. She loved poetry, especially Whitman. She had wanted children desperately, but had never conceived during her 5 years of marriage. Beatrice learned that Ethan was 30 years old, a veteran of the war who had returned to Wyoming to help his aging parents run the ranch. When they died, he had inherited everything. He had a younger sister, married and living in Denver. He was good with horses and better with cattle. He read the newspaper religiously and had opinions about politics that surprised her with their thoughtfulness. They did not speak much about James, and Beatrice was grateful for that. Ethan seemed to understand instinctively that she needed to think about other things, needed to exist in a space where grief was not the only emotion. But the grief was still there, waiting in the quiet moments. One evening about a week after the river, Beatrice was washing dishes when she suddenly dropped a plate. It shattered on the floor and she just stood there, staring at the pieces, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she gasped when Ethan came running. "I'm so sorry, I do not know what happened, hey, it's all right, it's just a plate." He put his hands on her shoulders. "Beatrice, what's wrong?" "That plate. James gave it to me, it was part of our wedding china." She looked up at him, her face crumpling. "Except it was not our wedding china, because that's all gone. Everything is gone. This is your mother's plate and I broke it, and I cannot even keep my grief straight anymore." Ethan pulled her into his arms without thinking. She collapsed against him, sobbing, and he just held her, one hand stroking her hair. She felt so small against him, so fragile. He wanted to protect her from this pain but did not know how. "I'm broken," she said against his chest. "I told you I was broken. You're grieving." "That's different than broken. It feels the same. I know." He kept holding her, letting her cry. "But you're going to get through this, I promise." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "How can you promise that? You do not know." "I know because you're strong. You survived losing your husband, losing your home, nearly drowning in a frozen river. You're still here, still standing. That's strength, Beatrice." She searched his face, looking for doubt or pity. She found neither. His dark eyes were serious, sincere. He really believed what he was saying. Slowly, carefully, she let herself believe it too, just a little bit. "I do not feel strong," she whispered. "You don't have to feel it for it to be true." They stood there in the kitchen, her in his arms, broken china at their feet. Something shifted between them in that moment, something that went beyond rescuer and rescued, beyond host and guest. Beatrice felt it and it scared her. It was too soon, too fast. James had only been dead 6 months. She stepped back, wiping her eyes. I should clean this up. I'll help. They swept up the broken plate together, working in silence. When it was done, Beatrice excused herself and went upstairs. She lay in Ethan's bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding. She could still feel his arms around her, still smell the scent of him, leather and wood smoke and something else uniquely his. She had not been held like that since James died. She had not wanted to be held, but she had wanted Ethan to hold her. Even now, alone in the dark, she wanted it still. The realization terrified her. She was not ready for this. She would never be ready for this. James had been her everything, her whole heart. There was no room for anyone else. Except there was a room, a tiny space that had opened when Ethan pulled her from the river and promised to heal her. A space that grew a little bigger every time he smiled at her, every time they talked, every time he looked at her with those serious dark eyes and made her feel seen. She rolled over and pressed her face into the pillow, fresh tears coming. "I'm sorry, James," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Downstairs, Ethan sat by the fire and wondered what he was doing. He had not planned for any of this, had not planned to feel this way about a broken widow he had pulled from a frozen river. He had been alone for so long, married to his ranch and his work, content with that life. Or so he had told himself. But now there was Beatrice with her sad blue eyes and her quiet strength, and he found himself thinking about her all the time, wanting to make her smile, wanting to chase away the shadows that haunted her, wanting things he had no right to want. She was not ready. She might never be ready. And he needed to respect that, even if it meant keeping his distance, even if it meant watching her leave when she was healed enough to go. But the thought of her leaving filled him with a loneliness he had not felt in years. December turned to January. Snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the ranch in white. Beatrice continued to grow stronger. Her cheeks filled out with regular meals. The haunted look in her eyes faded, though it never completely disappeared. She took over more of the household duties, cooking and cleaning and mending. She seemed to need the work, the structure of daily tasks. Ethan taught her to ride properly, giving her a gentle mare named Daisy. At first Beatrice was afraid, remembering James's death, but Ethan was patient and steady. He walked beside her the first few times, talking to her in that calm way he had, until she relaxed enough to enjoy it. "You're a natural," he said, watching her trot Daisy around the corral. "Hardly. But it's nice to be up high to see the land like this." She patted Daisy's neck. "James never had time to teach me properly. We were always too busy with the homestead work." It was the first time in days she had mentioned James. Ethan noticed but did not comment. "Well, now you know. You can ride whenever you want." They rode together sometimes, out across the snowy rangeland. Ethan showed her the boundaries of his property, nearly 1,000 acres of good grazing land. He talked about his plans for spring, expanding the herd, maybe bringing in some new breeding stock. She listened and asked questions, clearly interested. "You love this land," she observed one cold afternoon as they sat on their horses looking out over the valley. "I do. It's in my blood, I guess. My father used to say the land owns us more than we own it." He looked at her. "What about you? Did you love the homestead?" Beatrice was quiet for a moment. "I loved what it represented, the dream James and I shared, but the land itself," she shook her head. "It felt like it was fighting us the whole time. Nothing came easy. That's homesteading. It's brutal work, especially alone." "Yes," she gathered her reins. "We should head back. It's getting cold." They rode back in comfortable silence. Ethan noticed how natural she looked on horseback now, how her posture had improved, how she moved with the horse instead of against it. She was healing, just as he had promised she would. The realization brought both joy and sorrow. Joy because she deserved to heal. Sorrow because healing meant she might not need him anymore. That evening, Marcus pulled Ethan aside in the barn. "Boss, we need to talk." "About what?" "About that woman in your house." Marcus leaned against a stall door. "You're falling for her." Ethan started to deny it, then stopped. "Is it that obvious to anyone with eyes? And I think she's falling for you too, though she's fighting it hard. She loved her husband. She's not ready to move on." "Maybe not. But ready or not, feelings don't wait for convenient timing." Marcus gave him a serious look. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. I'm not going to push her into something she's not ready for." "I'm not saying push. I'm saying maybe let her know how you feel. Give her the choice. And if she chooses to leave, then she leaves. But at least you'll know you were honest." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Ethan. You deserve happiness, so does she. Maybe you deserve it together." Ethan thought about Marcus's words all through evening chores. When he came into the house, he found Beatrice in the kitchen making stew. She had flour on her cheek and her sleeves rolled up. She looked domestic and comfortable, like she belonged here. The sight made his chest tight. "Smells good," he said. She turned and smiled. It was a real smile, the first genuine one he had seen from her. It transformed her face, made her beautiful. "It's my mother's recipe. I hope it turns out all right." "I'm sure it will." He washed his hands at the pump. "Beatrice, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" The question seemed to surprise her. She set down the spoon she was holding and looked at him. "I am content. Is that the same as happy?" "I don't know. You tell me." She leaned against the counter, considering. "When I first came here, I was not anything. Not happy, not sad, just empty. Now I feel things again. Sometimes that's painful because I remember what I lost. But sometimes it's good. I laugh at Marcus's jokes. I enjoy riding Daisy. I look forward to our conversations in the evening." She met his eyes. "So yes, I suppose I am moving toward happiness, even if I'm not fully there yet." "I'm glad." He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her how much her presence had changed his life, how much he looked forward to seeing her every day, how much he would miss her if she left. But he kept quiet, remembering his promise not to push. They ate dinner with Marcus and the other hands, the conversation easy and full of laughter. Beatrice was coming out of her shell, becoming more comfortable with everyone. After the meal, she and Ethan did the dishes together, another routine that had developed naturally. "Ethan," she said as she dried a plate, "I need to think about leaving soon. Maybe next week. The weather is better, and I have imposed on your hospitality long enough." His hand stilled in the wash water. "You're not imposing. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. I know, and you have been so kind, but I need to start rebuilding my life. I cannot do that hiding away on your ranch. You're not hiding, you're healing. Maybe. But at some point, healing has to turn into living." She set down the dried plate. "I think I should go to Hot Springs. It's bigger than Buffalo, more opportunities for work. I can sew, I can cook, I can clean. Someone will hire me." Hot Springs was 3 days' ride south, a growing town with hot mineral springs that attracted visitors and settlers. It made sense as a destination, but Ethan hated the thought of her going there alone, hated the thought of her leaving at all. "Let me take you," he said. "Make sure you get settled safely." "You do not have to do that, I know, but I want to." He turned to look at her. "Beatrice, I pulled you from that river. I feel responsible for making sure you're all right. I am all right, thanks to you." She touched his arm briefly. "But yes, if you are willing, I would appreciate the escort. Hot Springs is a long way to travel alone." They made plans to leave the following Monday, giving Beatrice time to prepare and Ethan time to arrange things at the ranch so he could be gone for a week. The remaining days felt bittersweet. Ethan found himself memorizing small details. The way Beatrice hummed while she cooked, the way she tilted her head when she was listening intently, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. Sunday evening, the night before they were to leave, Beatrice could not sleep. She stood at the window of Ethan's bedroom looking out at the moonlit snow. Tomorrow she would leave this place, leave this man who had saved her in more ways than one. The thought made her chest ache. She heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she said. Ethan entered, still dressed, clearly unable to sleep too. "I saw your light, wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am. Just thinking." He came to stand beside her at the window. For a long moment they just stood there in silence, shoulders almost touching. "Beatrice," he said finally, "I need to tell you something before we leave tomorrow." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" He turned to face her. In the moonlight his face was all plains and shadows. "I know you are not ready to hear this. I know it's too soon and you're still grieving. But if I don't say it now, I might not get another chance. Ethan, I'm falling in love with you." The words came out quiet but firm. "I think I started falling the moment I pulled you from that river. Every day since then has just made it stronger. I know you loved your husband. I know you might not ever be able to love anyone else, but I needed you to know how I feel. I needed to give you that choice." Beatrice stared at him, her mind reeling. She had known, on some level, that his feelings had grown beyond simple kindness. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the emotion in his voice, made it real and immediate and terrifying. "I cannot," she whispered. "Ethan, I cannot. James is gone." He said it gently but firmly. "I'm sorry for that. I know you loved him. But he's gone, Beatrice, and you're still here. You're still alive. You deserve to live, to love again." Tears streamed down her face. "It is too soon. He has only been dead 7 months. What kind of wife forgets her husband after 7 months? You're not forgetting him. You're making room for something new. There's a difference." She shook her head, backing away from him. "I am sorry. I am so sorry, but I cannot do this. I thought I was healing, but maybe I am still too broken. Maybe I will always be too broken." "You're not broken," Ethan said, following her. He took her hands in his. "Beatrice, look at me. You are not broken. You're hurt and you're grieving, and that's normal. But underneath all that pain is a strong, beautiful woman who deserves happiness. Let yourself be happy. Let yourself feel something for someone else." "I do feel something." The admission burst out of her. "That is what scares me. I feel something for you and I hate myself for it. How can I feel this way when James is barely cold in his grave? What does that say about me? About what James and I had? It says you're human. It says your heart is capable of loving more than once." Ethan squeezed her hands. "Beatrice, James would want you to be happy. Would he really want you to spend the rest of your life alone, locked in grief? I do not know what he would want. He's gone. I cannot ask him." She pulled her hands free and wrapped her arms around herself. "I need time, Ethan. I need to figure out who I am without James before I can even think about being with someone else. Then take time. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility. To leave the door open." She looked at him, at this good man who had saved her life and promised to heal her. A man who was keeping that promise even now, pushing her to live instead of merely exist. Part of her wanted to step into his arms, to accept what he was offering. But the larger part, the part still chained to grief and guilt, held her back. "I am going to Hot Springs as planned," she said quietly. "I need distance. I need space to think." "All right." Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "I'll still take you. Make sure you get settled." "Thank you," she paused. "Ethan, I am not saying no. I am saying not yet. Can you understand that?" "I can." He moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. "Take all the time you need, Beatrice. But know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. I'll wait." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Beatrice sank onto the bed and let the tears come. She cried for James, for the life they had planned and lost. She cried for herself, for the confusion and guilt that tore at her. And she cried for Ethan, for the hope she heard in his voice, hope she was not sure she could fulfill. But underneath the tears, underneath the guilt and confusion, was something else. A tiny spark of something that felt like hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could heal enough to love again. They left early Monday morning, riding through clear, cold air under a pale winter sun. Ethan had packed supplies for a week, and they traveled at an easy pace, stopping frequently to rest the horses. They camped the first night in a sheltered valley, Ethan building a fire while Beatrice prepared a simple meal from their provisions. The conversation was stilted at first, both of them dancing around what had been said the night before. But gradually they relaxed into their usual ease. They talked about small things, the weather and the landscape and the trail ahead. By the time they bedded down for the night, things felt almost normal between them. The second day brought them into more mountainous terrain. Snow clung to the peaks and the air grew colder. They passed a few other travelers, traders and trappers heading north. Everyone exchanged news and warnings about weather and road conditions. That night, they stayed at a small way station, a rough cabin that offered shelter for a few coins. The old woman who ran it cooked them a hot meal and gave them blankets. She assumed they were married and Beatrice did not correct her, too tired to explain. "You've got a good man there," the old woman told Beatrice as they cleaned up after dinner. Not many would escort a woman all the way to hot springs in winter. "Yes," Beatrice said softly. "He is a good man." She lay awake that night, listening to Ethan's steady breathing from the other side of the cabin. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. He was a good man. A man who had saved her life, who had been patient and kind, who had promised to heal her and was keeping that promise. A man who loved her, and she was falling in love with him too, no matter how much she tried to deny it. The realization should have brought joy. Instead, it brought more guilt, more confusion. She had loved James with everything she had. Their love had been her whole world. How could she love someone else so soon? What did that say about her first love? Did it diminish what she and James had shared? She thought about James, trying to remember his face clearly. It had only been 7 months, but already the details were fading, becoming softer around the edges. She could not quite remember the exact shade of his eyes, the precise sound of his laugh. The forgetting hurt almost as much as the loss itself. But she could remember Ethan's eyes perfectly, could recall every inflection of his voice. And that hurt too, in a different way. She fell asleep with tears on her cheeks, no closer to an answer than before. The third day brought them to hot springs in late afternoon. The town was bigger than Buffalo, built around the natural hot springs that gave it its name. Steam rose from several pools, and the air smelled of sulfur and minerals. Buildings lined the main street, a mix of permanent structures and temporary storefronts. People moved with purpose through the cold, bundled in winter coats. Ethan helped Beatrice find a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. The woman was kind-faced and practical, offering Beatrice a small room in exchange for help with cooking and cleaning. It was exactly the kind of situation Beatrice needed, safe and respectable with opportunities to earn her keep. "I'll stay a few days," Ethan said as they stood in the boarding house parlor. "Make sure you're settled, help you find other work if you need it. You do not have to do that. You have done so much already." "I want to," she nodded, knowing he would not be dissuaded. Part of her was glad. She was not ready to say goodbye yet, even though she knew she needed to stand on her own. Ethan took a room at the hotel down the street. That evening they ate dinner at the boarding house with Mrs. Patterson and her other boarders. The conversation was lively, full of town gossip and stories. Beatrice found herself laughing, genuinely enjoying the company. After dinner, Ethan walked with her around the town square. The streets were quieter now, most people inside escaping the cold. Their breath misted in the air. "It's a nice town," Beatrice said. "I think I can build a life here." "I'm sure you can." Ethan's voice was neutral, but she heard the sadness underneath. "You'll do well, Beatrice. You're strong and capable. These people will see that." "I hope so." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Ethan, about what you said before we left, you don't have to say anything. I meant what I said. I'll wait." "I know, and I appreciate that, but I need you to understand something." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I am not the same woman James married. That Beatrice died when he did. I am still figuring out who this new Beatrice is, what she wants, what she's capable of. Until I know that, I cannot give anyone else a piece of myself. Do you understand?" "I do." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender. "Take all the time you need to find yourself. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Promise me you will not close yourself off completely. Promise me you will leave room for the possibility of love, even if it is not with me." The words made her chest ache. "I promise." They stood there in the cold Wyoming evening, two people caught between past and future, grief and hope. Then Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and chaste. "Good night, Beatrice." "Good night, Ethan." She watched him walk away toward the hotel, her hand pressed to where he had kissed her. The spot felt warm despite the cold. She stood there until he disappeared from view, then turned and went back to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson was in the kitchen making tea. She poured a cup for Beatrice and sat down across from her. "He's in love with you," the older woman said without preamble. Beatrice nearly choked on her tea. "What? That man who brought you here. He looks at you like you hung the moon. Are you in love with him?" "I barely know him. He rescued me from a frozen river and I have been staying at his ranch while I recovered. That is all." "That's not what I asked." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were shrewd. "I asked if you love him." Beatrice set down her cup with shaking hands. "I was married. My husband died 7 months ago." "I should not be thinking about another man," says who. "There's no rule book for grief, child. Your heart heals on its own timeline." "But 7 months seems so fast." "Does it, or does it feel fast because you think it should?" Mrs. Patterson reached across and patted her hand. "I lost my husband 15 years ago. I know what grief looks like. I also know what love looks like. You're feeling both and that's confusing, but it's also normal." "It does not feel normal. It feels like a betrayal." "Of who? Your dead husband or yourself?" The question was gentle but direct. "Listen, Beatrice. Life is short and love is rare. If you've found someone who makes you feel alive again, someone who treats you with kindness and respect, that's a gift. Don't throw it away because of some idea about how long you're supposed to grieve." Beatrice absorbed the words, turning them over in her mind. "What if I am not ready?" "Then you're not ready. But don't confuse not being ready with not being worthy. You deserve happiness. You deserve love. Whenever you're ready to accept that, you'll know what to do." The older woman squeezed her hand once more and left her alone with her tea and her thoughts. Beatrice sat in the warm kitchen and thought about Ethan, about James, about who she had been and who she was becoming. For the first time since James's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than just survival. A future that might include love. The next morning, Ethan came by to help Beatrice look for additional work. They visited the dress shop, the general store, and the hotel. At the dress shop, the owner, Mrs. Chen, was impressed by Beatrice's neat stitching and hired her on the spot to do alterations and mending 3 days a week. "This is perfect," Beatrice said as they left the shop. "Between this and helping Mrs. Patterson, I will be able to support myself." I'm glad. Ethan looked genuinely happy for her. You're building a good foundation here. They spent the afternoon walking around Hot Springs, Ethan pointing out various businesses and landmarks. The town had a church, a school, several saloons, and even a small library. It was a real community, the kind of place where a person could put down roots. That evening, Ethan announced he would be leaving the next morning. Already? Beatrice asked, trying to hide her disappointment. I've been gone almost a week. Marcus is capable, but I need to get back to the ranch. He looked at her steadily. Unless you need me to stay longer. No, you should go home. I am settled here. But even as she said it, she felt a hollow ache in her chest. Their last evening together was quiet. They ate dinner at the boarding house, then walked one more time around the town square. The cold bit through their coats, but neither suggested going inside. Will you write to me? Ethan asked. Let me know how you are doing. Yes, if you want me to, I do. He stopped walking and took both her hands in his. Beatrice, I meant what I said. I will wait, however long it takes. She looked up at him, at his serious dark eyes and strong features. He was handsome, she realized, though she had been too lost in her own pain to notice before. But more than handsome, he was kind. He was steady. He was the kind of man who kept his promises. Ethan, I do not know if I will ever be ready. It would not be fair to ask you to wait indefinitely. Let me worry about what's fair to me. You just focus on healing, on building your life. If the time comes when you're ready and you want to write to me, I'll come. If that time never comes, at least I'll know I was honest about my feelings. Before she could think better of it, Beatrice stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for giving me a place to heal, for believing in me when I did not believe in myself. His hands tightened on hers. You're worth believing in. They said goodnight then, both knowing it was really goodbye. Beatrice lay awake in her small room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the boarding house. She felt unmoored, adrift. The past month at Ethan's ranch had become familiar, comfortable. Now she was starting over again, alone. But maybe that was what she needed. Space to grieve properly, to figure out who she was without a man defining her. She had gone straight from her father's house to James's homestead. She had never been just Beatrice, answerable only to herself. Maybe it was time to learn. Ethan left at dawn, but not before stopping at the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson brought Beatrice downstairs, giving them privacy in the parlor. Travel safe, Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion. I will. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. I want you to have this. It's not much, but it should help until you're fully on your feet. Ethan, no, I cannot take your money. It's not a gift, it's an investment. You can pay me back someday if you want. But for now, take it, please. It will give me peace knowing you have something to fall back on. Reluctantly, she accepted the pouch. It was heavier than she expected. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Beatrice Richardson. You too, Ethan Quincy. He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. One more thing, don't spend your whole life looking backward. James is gone. You're not. Remember that. Then he was out the door, mounting his horse, riding away through the early morning streets. Beatrice stood at the window and watched until he disappeared around a corner. Her hand clutched the leather pouch and tears streamed down her face. Mrs. Patterson came and put an arm around her shoulders. There. He'll come back if you want him to. That is what I am afraid of, Beatrice whispered. What if I want him to? Winter deepened into February. Beatrice fell into the rhythm of her new life in Hot Springs. She helped Mrs. Patterson with cooking and cleaning, did alterations at the dress shop, and slowly began to build friendships with other women in town. She attended church on Sundays and sometimes visited the library, reading the poetry she loved. She wrote to Ethan every 2 weeks, careful letters that talked about her daily life, the people she was meeting, the work she was doing. She kept the tone light, friendly, nothing that could be construed as romantic. His letters back were similar, full of ranch news and town gossip from Buffalo. He never pushed, never asked for more than she was offering, but she thought about him constantly. At night before sleep, she would remember the sound of his voice, the way he had held her when she cried, the promise in his eyes when he said he would wait. She found herself comparing every man she met to him and finding them lacking. Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course. "You're thinking about him again." It was a Sunday afternoon in late February. They were in the kitchen making bread, their hands white with flour. "I think about him all the time," Beatrice admitted. "Is that wrong?" "Why would it be wrong?" "Because of James. Because I am supposed to be grieving." "You are grieving. Missing your husband and having feelings for someone new are not mutually exclusive." Mrs. Patterson punched down her dough with vigor. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I do not know. Every time I think about writing to Ethan, telling him I might be ready, I feel guilty, like I am betraying James's memory." "Can I tell you something about my husband, Mrs.?" Patterson shaped her dough into loaves. "The day before he died, he told me that if anything happened to him, I should find someone else, should be happy. He said he could not bear the thought of me spending the rest of my life alone." She smiled sadly. "I was so angry with him for saying that. I told him nothing was going to happen, that we would grow old together. But he was right to say it, and after he died, remembering those words gave me permission to live again." "Did you find someone else?" "No, but not because I thought it would be wrong. I just never met anyone who made me feel that spark, but if I had, I would have pursued it. Life is too short for regret, Beatrice." Beatrice thought about that conversation for days. She thought about James, trying to imagine what he would want for her. He had been a good man, kind and loving. Would he really want her to be alone forever? Or would he want her to find happiness again? She realized she would never know for certain. James was gone. She could not ask him. All she could do was make her own choice and live with it. March came, bringing the first hints of spring. The snow began to melt, and the days grew longer. Beatrice felt something loosening in her chest, some knot of grief that had been wound tight for so long. She was not over James. She would never be completely over him, but she was learning to carry the grief instead of being crushed by it. One evening she sat down at the small desk in her room and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. For a long time she just stared at it, pen in hand. Then she began to write. "Dear Ethan, I have been thinking about what you said before you left, about not spending my whole life looking backward. You were right. I have been so focused on what I lost that I have not allowed myself to see what I might gain. I am not completely healed. I am not sure I ever will be completely healed, but I am learning to live with the scars. I am learning that grief and joy can exist in the same heart. I am learning that loving James does not mean I cannot love someone else. I do not know if I am ready, but I think I might want to try. If you meant what you said about waiting, if the offer still stands, I would like to see you again. Not as your guest or someone you rescued, but as someone who might be able to love you back. The decision to write this letter has taken me 3 months. If you have changed your mind, I will understand. But if you have not, if you are still willing to be patient with my broken pieces, then I would like to see where this might lead. Yours, Beatrice." She sealed the letter and posted it the next morning before she could change her mind. Then she waited. The wait was agony. It would take a week for the letter to reach Ethan's ranch, and another week for his reply to reach her, assuming he replied at all. 2 weeks stretched ahead like an eternity. What if he had changed his mind? What if 3 months had been too long to wait? What if he had found someone else? The doubts plagued her, but she pushed through them, focusing on her work, her daily routines. Mrs. Patterson knew something was happening but wisely did not pry. Beatrice appreciated that more than she could say. 10 days after she posted the letter, Ethan rode into Hot Springs. Beatrice was at the dress shop when Mrs. Chen came into the back room where she was working. "Someone here to see you." Beatrice looked up from her mending. "Who?" But she already knew. Her heart was already racing. She set down her work with shaking hands and went to the front of the shop. Ethan stood just inside the door, hat in hand, dusty from travel. He looked tired and hopeful and uncertain all at once. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She could not seem to move, rooted to the spot. "You came." "Of course I came. I got your letter 3 days ago and left the next morning." He took a tentative step forward. "Beatrice, did you mean what you wrote about wanting to try?" "Yes." The word came out barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Yes, I meant it. I am not completely ready. But I want to be. With you." The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "I will go as slow as you need. I will wait as long as it takes. Just tell me what you need from me. I need you to be patient. I need you to understand that I might have hard days, days when the grief is too strong. I need you to accept that I will always love James, even as I learn to love you too. I can do that, all of that." His hands tightened on hers. "Beatrice, I am not trying to replace James or make you forget him. I just want to build something new with you, something that's ours." She felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears this time, tears of relief and hope and the beginnings of joy. "I want that too. Can I court you properly? Call on you, take you to dinner, do this right?" She laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "Yes, I would like that very much." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close. She felt his heart beating strong and steady against her cheek. This was different than how James had held her, but it was good in its own way, right in its own way. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for giving us a chance." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "Thank you for saving me. In every way a person can be saved." They stood there in the dress shop, holding each other, both of them crying a little. Mrs. Chen discreetly disappeared into the back room, giving them privacy. "I should go," Ethan said eventually. "Let you get back to work, but can I see you tonight? Take you to dinner?" "Yes, I would like that." He left reluctantly, promising to return at 6. Beatrice floated through the rest of her workday, unable to stop smiling. Mrs. Chen teased her good-naturedly but was clearly happy for her. That evening, Ethan took her to the nicest restaurant in Hot Springs. They sat by the window and talked for hours, making up for 3 months of careful letters. The conversation flowed easily, naturally. They talked about everything and nothing, laughing together, finishing each other's sentences. "I missed this," Beatrice said over dessert. "I miss talking to you. I missed you, not just talking to you, all of you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "These past 3 months have been the longest of my life. I am sorry I needed so much time. Don't apologize. You needed to heal in your own way, I understand that." He paused. "But now that I am here, now that we are trying this, I want to do it right. I want to court you properly with everyone knowing my intentions." "What are your intentions, Ethan Quincy?" He met her eyes steadily. "To marry you if you will have me, not tomorrow, not next week, when you are ready. But that is where I am headed. I want you to know that from the start." The directness should have scared her. Instead, it filled her with a calm certainty. This man, this good, honest man, wanted to build a life with her, and she wanted that too. "I cannot promise when I will be ready," she said carefully, "but I can promise to try to get there. That is all I ask." They walked back to the boarding house through the spring evening, hand in hand. At the door, Ethan stopped and turned to her. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Beatrice hesitated. She had not kissed anyone but James in 6 years. The thought of kissing Ethan felt momentous, a line she could not uncross once she stepped over it, but she wanted to cross it. She wanted to kiss this man who had been so patient, so kind, so constant. "Yes," she whispered. He cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet, a kiss of promise rather than passion. When he pulled back, they were both smiling. "Good night, Beatrice." "Good night, Ethan." She went inside and leaned against the closed door, her fingers pressed to her lips. "Mrs. Patterson appeared from the parlor with a knowing smile. "Well, well," Beatrice said, unable to stop grinning. "He is staying in town for a few days. We are courting." "About time." Mrs. Patterson hugged her. "I am happy for you, dear. You deserve this." "I think I am starting to believe that." Ethan stayed in Hot Springs for a week, courting Beatrice with old-fashioned propriety. He took her to church on Sunday, walked with her every evening, brought her flowers from the mercantile. They talked endlessly, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. He met her friends and made a good impression on all of them. When he had to return to his ranch, they said goodbye with the understanding that he would return in 3 weeks. In between, they would write to each other, but this time the letters would be different. This time they would be honest about their feelings. "I love you," Ethan said as he prepared to leave. "I know it is too soon to say it, but I do. I love you, Beatrice." She touched his face, memorizing the feel of him. "I am not there yet, but I think I am on my way. That is enough." He kissed her forehead. "I will see you in 3 weeks." She watched him ride away, but this time the ache in her chest was different. It was not grief or fear. It was anticipation. She was looking forward to his return, looking forward to their future together. Spring turned the world green and new. Beatrice threw herself into her work and her life in Hot Springs, but now everything had a shimmer of possibility. She allowed herself to imagine a future with Ethan, a life at his ranch, maybe children someday. The thoughts did not make her feel guilty anymore. They made her feel hopeful. She talked to James sometimes, late at night when she could not sleep. She told him about Ethan, about her conflicted feelings, about her slow journey toward healing. She imagined James giving his blessing, smiling that gentle smile of his and telling her to be happy. It helped. Ethan returned exactly 3 weeks later, as promised. They fell back into their pattern of evening walks and long conversations. On his second night back, they sat by the hot springs, watching steam rise into the cool evening air. "I have been thinking," Ethan said, "about the future, about what our life might look like. Tell me." "I would want you at the ranch, of course. It's a big house, plenty of room. You could have your own space if you need it. And if you wanted to keep working, keep doing alterations or whatever makes you happy, that would be fine too. I don't expect you to just be a rancher's wife. I want you to be yourself." His words touched something deep in Beatrice's heart. "You really mean that, about me being myself?" "Of course. I fell in love with you, Beatrice, not some idea of what a wife should be. You." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think I could be happy at your ranch. I was happy there before. I felt safe. You would be safe, always." He put his arm around her. "I want to take care of you, not because you need taking care of, but because I want to, because making you happy makes me happy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Beatrice felt something settling in her chest, a sense of rightness. This was what she wanted. This man, this life. She was not betraying James by wanting it. She was honoring the love he had taught her by being willing to love again. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I am almost ready." He turned to look at her. "Almost. Almost. I need a little more time." "But not much." She took his hand. "By summer, I think, by summer I will be ready to say yes." The joy on his face was worth every moment of waiting. "Summer. I can wait until summer." They courted through April and into May. Ethan made the trip to Hot Springs every 3 weeks like clockwork. The town grew accustomed to seeing them together, to the way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him. Some people gossiped about the timing, about how quickly the widow was moving on, but most people saw what was obvious. Two people who loved each other, trying to build something good from grief and loss. In late May, Beatrice went with Ethan to visit his ranch for a weekend. It had been 4 months since she had left, and everything felt both familiar and new. Marcus greeted her warmly, clearly pleased to see her. The house looked the same, but this time Beatrice saw it with different eyes, not as a refuge but as a potential home. They spent Saturday riding across the property, Ethan showing her improvements he had made, talking about his plans for the future. That evening they sat on the porch and watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "I love it here," Beatrice said. "I forgot how peaceful it is." "I hoped you would feel that way." Ethan took her hand. "Beatrice, I know you said summer, but I need to ask now, even if you are not ready to answer. Will you marry me?" She turned to him, her heart full. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. You mean it. You are ready. I am ready. I love you, Ethan. I am not sure when it happened exactly, but somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, and I am ready to start our life together." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly this time, with passion and promise and joy. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "When?" he asked. "When can we get married?" "Soon. I need to give notice at the dress shop and the boarding house need to pack my things." A month. I can wait a month." He kissed her again. "Beatrice, you have made me so happy. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are happy too. You already do, just by being you." They were married in Hot Springs on a perfect June morning. The ceremony was small but lovely, held in the church with their closest friends in attendance. Mrs. Patterson cried. Marcus stood up as Ethan's best man. Mrs. Chen from the dress shop made Beatrice a beautiful white dress with delicate lace. As Beatrice walked down the aisle toward Ethan, she thought about James. She thought about the life they had planned and the love they had shared. That love would always be part of her, a chapter in her story. But it was not the only chapter. She was writing a new one now, with this good man who had saved her from more than just a frozen river. Ethan met her at the altar with tears in his eyes. They spoke their vows with steady voices, promising to love and honor each other all the days of their lives. When the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her gently, and the small congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food and music and laughter. They danced their first dance as husband and wife while everyone watched. Beatrice felt light, unburdened, happy in a way she had not thought possible a year ago. "Happy?" Ethan asked as they swayed to the music. "So happy. Are you?" "Happier than I knew I could be." He pulled her closer. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for giving us a chance. Thank you for not giving up on me, for promising to heal me and then actually doing it." "We healed each other, I think." She smiled up at him. "Yes, I think we did." They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Hot Springs, in a room overlooking the hot springs. Beatrice was nervous, having only been with James before, but Ethan was patient and gentle. They took their time learning each other, building intimacy slowly. Afterwards, lying in his arms, Beatrice felt at peace. "No regrets?" Ethan asked, stroking her hair. "None. You, not a single one." They moved to the ranch the next day, beginning their life together. Beatrice threw herself into making the house a home, hanging curtains and planting a garden. She still did alterations occasionally, but mostly she focused on the ranch and her marriage. Marcus treated her like family, and the other ranch hands quickly grew to respect her. The first year of marriage had its adjustments. They learned each other's habits and quirks, figured out how to argue and make up, built a foundation of trust and communication. Sometimes Beatrice had hard days when the grief over James hit unexpectedly. Ethan learned to recognize those days and give her space while still letting her know he was there. But mostly there were good days. Days of laughter and work and quiet contentment. Days of riding across the rangeland together, of sitting on the porch in the evening, of building a life side by side. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening as they sat by the fire, nervous about how he would react. Truly. His face lit up with wonder. "We're going to have a baby." "Yes, in October, I think." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, reverently. "This is the best news, the very best news." The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice was sick for the first few months, exhausted in the last ones. But Ethan was attentive and supportive, taking over household tasks when she could not manage them, bringing her tea and crackers when she was nauseous, rubbing her feet when they swelled. Their son was born on a cold October night, after a long and difficult labor. Ethan stayed with Beatrice the whole time, holding her hand, encouraging her. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling, they both cried with relief and joy. "What should we name him?" Ethan asked, cradling the tiny bundle. Beatrice had thought about this. She looked at her husband, at the love and wonder on his face, and knew what was right. Samuel. Samuel Quincy. It was not James's name. This baby was not a replacement or a consolation. He was his own person, the product of her and Ethan's love. Giving him his own name felt important. "Samuel," Ethan repeated, smiling down at his son. "It's perfect." Being a mother transformed Beatrice in ways she had not expected. She loved Samuel fiercely, completely. Watching Ethan with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, made her love him even more. They were a family now, building a future together. 2 years later, they had a daughter. They named her Emma, after Ethan's mother. She had Beatrice's blue eyes and Ethan's dark hair, and she was absolutely fearless from the moment she could walk. Samuel adored his little sister, following her around and trying to protect her even though she clearly needed no protection. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch prospered under Ethan's careful management. The children grew healthy and strong. Beatrice found contentment in her life, in this family she and Ethan had built together. Sometimes she thought about James, especially on the anniversary of his death. She would go to the small cemetery in Buffalo and lay flowers on his grave, telling him about her life, her children, her happiness. She liked to think he approved, that he was glad she had found love again. One evening when Samuel was 6 and Emma was 4, Beatrice and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm summer air. "Do you remember," Beatrice said softly, "when you pulled me from that frozen river? I remember everything about that day. I told you I was broken, and you said you would heal me." She turned to look at him. "You kept that promise. You healed me in ways I did not think were possible." We healed each other. Ethan took her hand. "You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just running this ranch. You gave me love, that healed parts of me I did not even know needed healing." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching their children play. The past was still part of them, always would be. James lived on in Beatrice's memories, in the lessons their brief marriage had taught her about love and loss. But the past did not define them anymore. "I'm happy," Beatrice said. "I did not think I would ever be able to say that again, but I am so happy." "Good." Ethan squeezed her hand. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to be happy." Samuel came running up to the porch, Emma trailing behind him. "Papa, can we ride the horses, please?" Ethan looked at Beatrice, who nodded. "All right, but just to the creek and back before dark." They helped the children onto gentle horses, Ethan leading Samuel while Beatrice walked with Emma. The summer evening was perfect, golden light slanting across the rangeland. Beatrice breathed in the smell of grass and horses and home, feeling grateful for this life she had been given. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Beatrice and Ethan lay together in the darkness. She curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Ethan, thank you, for saving me that day on the river, for being patient, for loving me when I did not think I could be loved." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me. For being brave enough to love again. For giving us this beautiful life." She tilted her face up and kissed him, a kiss full of love and contentment and promise. They had come so far from that frozen December day when he had pulled her from the river. She had been broken then, shattered by grief and loss. He had promised to heal her, and he had. They had healed each other, built something strong and lasting from the broken pieces. Their love was not perfect, but it was real and true and worth every moment of struggle it had taken to find it. Beatrice fell asleep in her husband's arms, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The broken widow who had wanted to die in a frozen river had become a woman who loved life, who cherished her family, who woke each morning grateful for the gift of another day. She had learned that healing was possible, that hearts could break and mend and love again, that grief and joy could coexist, that endings could become beginnings, that sometimes salvation came in the form of a cowboy who refused to let you give up, who promised to heal you, and then spent years keeping that promise. In the darkness of their bedroom, safe and warm and loved, Beatrice whispered one final thank you to the universe, to James, to Ethan, to whatever force had brought her through the darkness and into the light. Then she closed her eyes and dreamed of the future stretching ahead, bright and full of possibility. Years continued to pass at the Quincy Ranch, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved reading as much as riding, often found with his nose in a book when he should have been doing chores. Emma was pure energy, always climbing trees or racing her horse or challenging the ranch hands to contests. Ethan joked that she would either become a champion rider or give him gray hair, probably both. When Samuel was 10 and Emma was 8, they welcomed another son, Daniel. His arrival was unexpected but joyous, and the older children doted on their baby brother. Beatrice was older now, more confident in motherhood, and she treasured this late blessing. The ranch continued to prosper. Ethan had a gift for breeding cattle, and his stock was sought after throughout Wyoming. He had expanded the operation carefully, hiring more hands, improving the buildings and fencing. But he never let work consume him. He always made time for his family, for evening meals together, for teaching his children to ride and rope, for nights on the porch with Beatrice. Beatrice had become a pillar of the community. She organized charity drives for families in need, taught Sunday school at the church, and mentored young women new to the area. People came to her for advice, for comfort, for her steady presence. She who had once felt so broken had become someone others leaned on for strength. She still thought about James, but the memories had softened with time. She could remember the good times without being overwhelmed by grief. She had finally forgiven herself for moving on, for loving Ethan, for building this new life. James had been her first love, the man who had taught her what partnership meant. Ethan was her great love, the man who had shown her that hearts could heal and expand to hold more than she thought possible. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised her with a trip to Hot Springs, leaving the children with Marcus and his wife, who had married a few years back. They stayed at the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, ate at the same restaurant where he had first declared his intentions. 10 years, Beatrice mused as they walked around the town square after dinner. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Best 10 years of my life, Ethan said. Well, except maybe for that first year. That was both the best and most terrifying. She laughed. Why terrifying? Because I kept waiting for you to realize you had made a mistake, that you had married me too quickly, that you would regret it. He pulled her close. But you never did. You chose me every day. You still choose me. Of course I do. You're my home, Ethan, my safe place, my heart. She reached up and touched his face. I was so lost when you found me. Not just physically lost in that river, but lost in grief and guilt and fear. You gave me back my life. You showed me that broken things could be mended, that endings could become beginnings. You did the same for me. I did not even realize how alone I was until you filled my house with light and laughter, until you gave me a family, a real home, not just a place to sleep between working. He kissed her forehead. I love you, Beatrice, more now than on our wedding day. I did not think that was possible, but it's true. I love you too, so much. They stood there in the spring evening in the same town where they had courted and married, and renewed their vows to each other without speaking a word. Just holding each other, remembering where they had been and celebrating where they were. The next morning they visited the boarding house where Beatrice had lived. Mrs. Patterson had passed away 2 years ago, and the house had new owners now. But they let Beatrice and Ethan walk through, see her old room, remember those early days of their courtship. I was so scared then, Beatrice said, standing in the small room. Scared of my feelings, scared of betraying James, scared of being happy. What changed? You, your patience. Your certainty that we could build something good together. She turned to him. And Mrs. Patterson, she helped me understand that loving you did not diminish what I had with James, that the heart has infinite capacity if we let it. They also visited the dress shop where Beatrice had worked. Mrs. Chen was still there, older but still sharp. She hugged Beatrice tightly. Look at you, the older woman said. So happy, so settled. I knew that Cowboy was good for you the moment I saw how he looked at you. He is. Beatrice glanced at Ethan with a smile. Best decision I ever made, saying yes to him. On the ride home, Beatrice found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this place. If someone had told her 10 years ago, as she stood on that frozen river contemplating death, that she would end up here, happy and loved with 3 children and a good man, she would not have believed them. The pain had been too big then, the future too dark to imagine, but Ethan had saved her. Not just from the river, but from her own despair. He had promised to heal her, and he had kept that promise day after day, year after year. And somewhere in that healing, they had fallen in love and built this beautiful life. When they reached the ranch, the children came running out to greet them. Samuel serious and trying to act grown up at 10, Emma wild and exuberant, baby Daniel toddling on unsteady legs. Beatrice scooped Daniel up while Ethan gathered the older 2 in a hug. Did you miss us? Ethan asked. Yes, Emma declared. But Marcus let me ride Lightning and I stayed on the whole time, even when he ran fast. That's my girl. Ethan ruffled her hair. Samuel hung back slightly, then asked quietly, Did you have a good time? Beatrice held out her free arm and he came to her, letting her pull him close. We did. But we missed you 3 terribly. Marcus appeared from the barn, smiling at the reunion. His wife Sarah came from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. They had become like family over the years, raising their own children alongside the Quincy kids. That evening, after the children were in bed, Beatrice and Ethan sat on their porch in the familiar comfort of home. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air sweet with the smell of spring grass. Thank you for the trip, Beatrice said. It was good to go back to remember. I wanted to mark the occasion properly. 10 years deserve celebrating. Here's to 10 more. She raised the glass of wine he had poured her, and 10 after that, and 10 after that. He clinked his glass against hers. I will take as many years as we get. Every single one is a gift. They drank to that, to their past and their future, to the family they had built and the love that sustained them. The years ahead would bring their own challenges and sorrows, as all lives do. The children would grow up and leave, pursuing their own dreams. There would be hard winters and failed crops and losses to bear. But they would face it all together. This cowboy and the widow he had saved. This couple who had learned that broken hearts could mend, and that love could bloom even in the darkest times. They had promised to heal each other, and they had kept that promise, creating a life richer and fuller than either had imagined possible. Beatrice looked at her husband in the starlight, this good man who had changed everything, and felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for his courage in pulling her from that river, for his patience in courting her grief-stricken heart, for his steadfast love through all the years since. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yes, I'm glad you saved me that day, not just from the river, from giving up, from thinking my life was over." She took his hand. "You showed me it was just beginning." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "We saved each other, love. That's what makes it perfect." And there on their porch, under the Wyoming stars, surrounded by everything they had built together, they sat in perfect contentment. The broken widow and the cowboy who had healed her, finally and fully home.